The sun had already claimed two of Isaac Quinlan's cattle by the time he spotted the woman lying motionless in the ravine, her pale blue dress stark against the cracked earth like a fallen piece of sky. He pulled his horse to a halt, dust rising around them in the merciless August heat of 1878, and for a moment he thought she might already be dead. But something in the way her fingers were curled, still grasping at the dirt as if she had been crawling toward some phantom salvation, told him there might be time. Isaac swung down from his saddle, his boots hitting the ground with a thud that sent a lizard scattering. He was a tall man, weathered by 26 years of hard living on the plains, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creekstone. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with surprising gentleness as he turned the woman onto her back. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with honey-colored hair that had come loose from its pins and lay tangled with dust across her face. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin burning with fever. "Can you hear me?" he asked, though he expected no answer. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Isaac looked around the desolate landscape, seeing nothing but endless prairie grass baking under the relentless sun. No wagon, no horse, no supplies. How she had ended up here, miles from the nearest settlement, was a mystery he did not have time to solve. He knew what heatstroke looked like. He had seen it kill men twice her size, men who knew the land and should have known better. The woman did not have much time. Isaac scooped her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, how fragile she felt against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the fever radiating through her clothes. "I have got you," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. "You are going to be all right." His horse, a steady roan named Copper, stood patiently as Isaac mounted with the woman in his arms. It was awkward, uncomfortable, but he managed to settle her across his lap, one arm supporting her shoulders while the other held the reins. The nearest water was the creek that ran through the valley about 2 miles east. It would be cool there, shaded by cottonwoods, with water deep enough to bring down her fever. Isaac urged Copper forward, moving as quickly as he dared. Every jolt and bounce of the horse's gait seemed to hurt her, though she made no sound. He found himself talking to her anyway. A steady stream of words meant more to keep himself calm than to comfort her. "My name is Isaac. I have got a ranch about 5 miles from here. Not much of one, just me and some cattle in a cabin that needs fixing. I come out this way to check on the herd in the summer pastures. You picked a hell of a day to collapse, I will tell you that. Must be over 100 degrees. The woman's breathing was shallow, ragged. Isaac pressed Copper faster, scanning the horizon for the line of trees that would mark the creek. The sun beat down on them without mercy, and he could feel sweat running down his back, soaking through his shirt. He pulled his hat lower over his eyes and kept talking. "I do not know what you are doing out here all alone. Council Bluffs is a good 15 miles that way, and there is nothing but empty land this direction. Maybe you got separated from a wagon train, though I have not heard of any coming through recently." The trees finally appeared in the distance, a dark green smudge against the bleached sky. Isaac felt a surge of relief and pushed Copper into a faster trot. The woman's head bounced against his shoulder, and he tightened his grip on her, willing her to hold on just a little longer. When they reached the creek, Isaac practically fell from the saddle in his haste. The shade of the cottonwoods felt like a blessing, dropping the temperature by at least 10 degrees. The water burbled over smooth stones, clear and cold from its source in the hills. Isaac carried the woman to the edge and laid her carefully on the bank, her feet just touching the water. He worked quickly, pulling off her shoes and stockings, loosening the collar of her dress. His hands hesitated at the buttons, propriety warring with necessity. But he unbuttoned enough to give her room to breathe. Then he soaked his bandana in the creek and began wiping her face, her neck, her arms. The water ran brown with dust as he washed away the grime, revealing skin flushed red with fever. "Come on," he said softly. "Come back. You have made it this far." He soaked the bandana again and again, dripping cold water over her forehead, her temples, the pulse points at her wrists and throat. Her breathing seemed to ease slightly, though her eyes remained closed. Isaac sat back on his heels, studying her face now that it was clean. She was beautiful, he realized, with fine features and a scattering of freckles across her nose. There was something determined about her face, even unconscious, a set to her jaw that suggested strength. Isaac filled his canteen with fresh water and carefully dribbled a few drops between her cracked lips. She did not swallow, and the water ran down her chin, but he tried again, patient and persistent. This time her throat moved slightly, an involuntary reflex, but enough to give him hope. The afternoon stretched long and hot around them. Isaac moved the woman more fully into the shade, pulling her upper body into his lap so he could support her head, while he continued to give her water drop by careful drop. He kept the bandana wet and cool, draping it across her forehead. And when that seemed to help, he used his spare shirt to soak in the creek and lay across her chest. Copper grazed nearby, content in the good grass that grew along the creek bank. Birds called from the trees overhead, and somewhere in the distance, Isaac heard the lonely cry of a hawk. He felt suspended in time, as if the world had narrowed to just this shaded spot, this unconscious woman, and the sound of running water. He found himself studying her hands, small and delicate, but marked with calluses that surprised him. These were not the soft hands of a city woman. She had worked, done hard labor of some kind. There were old scars on her palms, thin white lines that spoke of accidents with knives or tools. A working woman then, not some genteel lady who had wandered off from a fancy carriage. "Who are you?" Isaac asked aloud. "What is your name?" As if in answer, the woman's eyelids fluttered. Isaac leaned forward, heart quickening. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises the color of sage after rain, a gray-green that seemed to look right through him. For a moment she simply stared, confusion clouding her features. And then panic set in. She tried to sit up, tried to pull away from him, and Isaac had to use both hands to keep her from hurting herself. "Easy, easy," he said firmly. "You are safe. I found you in the ravine. You nearly died of heat stroke." She stopped struggling, but continued to look at him with those wide, frightened eyes. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Isaac reached for the canteen. "Here, drink this." Slowly. He held the canteen to her lips, and this time she drank, though it seemed to pain her. She managed a few swallows before turning her head away, coughing. Isaac set the canteen aside and waited, giving her time to gather herself. "Where?" she finally managed to whisper, her voice like dried leaves. "Creek about 2 miles east of where I found you. We are in the valley between my ranch and the summer pastures. You are safe," he repeated, hoping to ease the fear in her eyes. She looked around slowly, taking in the trees, the water, the endless sky above them. When her gaze came back to him, some of the panic had faded, replaced by exhaustion so profound that Isaac felt it in his own bones. "Thank you," she whispered. "What is your name?" "Grace," she said after a moment. "Grace Northwood." "Isaac Quinlan. Can you tell me what happened, how you ended up out there?" Grace closed her eyes, and for a moment Isaac thought she had passed out again. But then she spoke, her words slow and labored. "Wagon broke down. My husband, he went for help. Told me to wait. I waited 2 days. Water ran out. I tried to walk." "Your husband?" Isaac felt something sink in his chest, though he could not say why. "Where is he now?" "I do not know." Her voice cracked. "I do not know how long I was walking. Lost track." Isaac glanced around instinctively, as if the missing husband might appear from the grass. "How long ago did he leave you?" 5 days, maybe 6. I am not sure anymore." Tears began to leak from the corners of her closed eyes. "He said he would come back. He promised. 6 days. Isaac felt anger stir in his gut. What kind of man left his wife alone in broken wagon for 6 days in the middle of summer? Where was the wagon? North of Council Bluffs. We were heading west to California. The wheel broke. Grace's breathing was becoming labored again, and Isaac realized he was asking too many questions, pushing her too hard. "All right, that is enough for now. You need to rest. We will figure out the rest later." He repositioned her more comfortably in his lap, supporting her head against his shoulder. "Just rest." Grace did not argue. Within moments, her breathing had evened out into the shallow rhythm of sleep. Isaac sat with her as the afternoon wore on, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, feeling the fever that still burned through her. He continued to cool her with the wet bandana, to give her water when she stirred enough to swallow, to simply be there as the hours passed. His mind worked over the problem: a husband who had abandoned his wife for nearly a week, a woman who had tried to walk through hostile terrain in the brutal heat of August, a broken wagon somewhere north of Council Bluffs. None of it sat right with him. Even if the man had gotten lost or hurt trying to find help, 6 days was too long. Someone should have come back. The sun began its long descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The temperature dropped mercifully, and Isaac felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Grace seemed to be breathing more easily now, her fever perhaps breaking, though it was hard to be sure. He would need to keep her cool through the night, keep giving her water, and hope that by morning she would be strong enough to travel. The question was where to take her. Council Bluffs was the nearest town, but that was still 15 miles away, and he was not sure Grace could handle that kind of journey yet. His cabin was closer, only 5 miles, but taking an unconscious woman to his home alone felt like the kind of thing that could ruin both their reputations. Not that Isaac cared much for his own reputation, such as it was, but he had to think of Grace. He would decide in the morning, he told himself. For now, he just needed to keep her alive. As dusk settled over the prairie, Isaac carefully moved Grace to a more sheltered spot beneath the largest cottonwood, where the roots had created a natural hollow. He unsaddled Copper and used the saddle as a pillow for her, covering her with his bedroll. He had planned to be out checking the herd for just the day, so his supplies were limited, but he had some jerky and hardtack in his saddlebag, enough to keep him going. He built a small fire as darkness fell, more for comfort than warmth, and sat beside Grace with his back against the tree trunk. She slept fitfully, sometimes muttering words he could not make out, other times crying softly. Each time she grew agitated, Isaac would soothe her with water and soft words, gentling her back into deeper sleep. "You are safe," he told her again and again. "I have got you. You are safe." Somewhere in the night, Grace's fever finally broke. Isaac felt it happen, the moment when her skin went from burning hot to merely warm, when her breathing deepened and steadied. Relief flooded through him so intensely that his hands shook as he checked her pulse, found it stronger and more regular. She would live. The thought filled him with a fierce joy he did not quite understand. He had known this woman for mere hours, knew almost nothing about her except that she had been abandoned and nearly died because of it. But the idea that she would live, that he had saved her, felt like the most important thing he had ever done. Isaac dozed off sometime before dawn, his hand still resting on Grace's shoulder, his body angled protectively over hers. When he woke, the first light of morning was painting the sky pale pink, and Grace was watching him with those gray-green eyes, fully conscious and aware. "You stayed," she said, her voice still hoarse but stronger than before. "Of course I stayed," Isaac replied, sitting up and stretching muscles stiff from the awkward position. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle and left in the sun to dry." Grace managed a weak smile. "But alive, thanks to you." Isaac helped her sit up slowly, supporting her back when she swayed. "Take it easy. You are not out of the woods yet. Can you drink some water?" She nodded, and this time she held the canteen herself, though her hands trembled. She drank deeply, and Isaac had to remind her to slow down, to let her body adjust. When she had finished, she looked at him properly for the first time, really seeing him. "You are a cowboy," she observed. "Ranch hand, really. I have got my own place now, but it is not much, just me trying to build something out of nothing." Isaac stood and moved to the creek to refill the canteen, giving her space to collect herself. When he returned, Grace had managed to pull herself into a more dignified sitting position, though she still looked pale and drawn. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Grace shook her head slowly. "No, not anyone. Some men would have just kept riding. Some would have taken advantage. You stayed with me all day and all night. You cared for me like I mattered. That is not anyone. That is you." Isaac felt heat rise in his face and was grateful for the beard that hid it. "Well, I could not just leave you there to die. That would be a sin in any man's book." They fell into silence, the morning settling around them with the calls of waking birds and the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. Isaac built up the fire and set some water to boil for coffee, glad he had thought to bring a small tin with him. The familiar ritual of making coffee gave him something to do with his hands, while he figured out what to say next. "We need to talk about what comes next," he finally said, handing Grace a tin cup of strong black coffee. "You are not well enough to travel far yet, but we cannot stay here indefinitely. My cabin is about 5 miles west. Council Bluffs is 15 miles northeast. What do you want to do?" Grace wrapped her hands around the cup, staring into the dark liquid. "I do not know. I need to find out what happened to my husband. He might be hurt or lost or—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. "Or he might have abandoned you on purpose." Grace's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with anger, and something else, something that looked like fear. "He would not do that. Robert is a good man. He loves me." Isaac held up his hands placatingly. "I am sorry. I should not have said that. I am sure there is an explanation." But even as he said the words, he did not believe them, and from the way Grace's face crumpled, he suspected she did not either. "He changed," she whispered. "After we left Ohio, he became angry all the time, impatient. Said I slowed him down. Said if I had not insisted on bringing so many things, the wagon would not have broken. But they were just my mother's dishes, her quilts, small things to remember her by after she died." A tear rolled down Grace's cheek. He would not just leave me. He would not. Isaac wanted to go find this Robert and teach him what it meant to be a man, to honor the vows you made. But that would not help Grace now. Instead, he moved closer, sitting beside her in the grass. "I tell you what, why do not we go to my cabin? It is closer, and you can rest properly, get your strength back. Then when you are feeling better, we can go into Council Bluffs and ask around about your husband. Someone might have seen him, might know what happened. Does that sound all right?" Grace considered this, her face drawn with exhaustion and grief. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Thank you, Isaac. You have already done so much, and I hate to impose further, but I do not think I can make it to town yet. It is no imposition. I have got plenty of room, and it will be good to have someone to cook for besides myself." Isaac smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Fair warning, though, the cabin is rough. I built it myself, and I am a better rancher than I am a carpenter." That earned him a small smile from Grace, the first real one he had seen. It transformed her face, made her look younger and less burdened. Isaac felt his heart do something strange in his chest, a flutter he had not felt since he was a boy with his first crush. He helped Grace to her feet, keeping a firm grip on her arm when she swayed. She was weaker than she wanted to admit, he could tell, but there was pride in the way she straightened her spine and tried to walk on her own. Isaac let her have that pride, only stepping in to support her when absolutely necessary. Getting Grace onto Copper proved to be a challenge. She was too weak to mount on her own, and Isaac finally had to lift her bodily into the saddle. He swung up behind her, arranging her so she could lean back against his chest, and wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady. Grace stiffened at first at the intimate contact, but exhaustion won out over propriety, and she sagged against him. "Sorry," she murmured. "Nothing to be sorry for. Just rest. I will get us there." They rode slowly through the morning, Isaac keeping Copper to a walk to avoid jostling Grace too much. She dozed against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and Isaac found himself hyper-aware of every place their bodies touched. It felt wrong to notice such things when she was ill and vulnerable, when she was a married woman, but he could not seem to help himself. She fit against him like she belonged there, and that thought was dangerous in ways he did not want to examine. The cabin appeared in the distance around mid-morning, a small structure of logs and sod roof, sitting in a natural hollow, surrounded by gentle hills. It was not much to look at, but it was solid and weatherproof, and it was his. Isaac felt a swell of pride mixed with embarrassment as they approached. He had not entertained guests before, had not worried about what the place looked like to outside eyes. Now he was seeing it as Grace might see it, the rough-hewn door that hung slightly crooked, the single window with its oiled paper covering, the vegetable garden that had gotten away from him in the summer heat. "It is not much," he said, as he dismounted and helped Grace down. "It is beautiful," Grace replied, and she sounded sincere. "You built this yourself?" "Mostly. Had some help with the roof. That is tricky work for one man." Isaac supported Grace as they walked to the door, which he pushed open to reveal the single room that served as his entire living space. A bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, a fireplace with a few pots and pans hanging beside it. Everything was clean and orderly, at least, thanks to his mother's insistence on proper habits drilled into him from childhood. Isaac led Grace to the bed and helped her sit. She sank onto the mattress with a sigh of relief, and he quickly moved to pull off her shoes, which were in terrible condition, the leather cracked and splitting. "You rest. I am going to get some proper food in you, something more substantial than water and coffee." He busied himself at the fireplace, building up the fire and putting a pot of soup to heat. It was just dried vegetables and a bit of salt pork, nothing fancy, but it would give Grace strength. While the soup cooked, he brought her a basin of water and a cloth so she could wash her face and hands. He turned his back to give her privacy, focusing on stirring the pot. "Isaac," Grace said after a while. Her voice was hesitant. "I need to change out of this dress. It is filthy, and I have been wearing it for days, but I do not have anything else." Isaac thought quickly. "I have got a clean shirt that might work as a nightdress. It will be big on you, but it is better than nothing. And I can wash your dress, hang it to dry." He pulled out his newest shirt, one he had been saving for trips to town, and handed it to Grace without looking at her directly. "I will just step outside, give you some privacy. Call when you are ready." Isaac retreated to the yard, focusing his attention on Copper, who needed to be brushed down and fed after the long ride. He took his time with the task, giving Grace plenty of space. When she finally called that she was decent, he returned to find her sitting on the bed in his shirt, which did indeed hang on her like a tent, making her look small and vulnerable. Her dress lay folded beside her, dusty and stained. "A soup is ready," Isaac said, ladling out a generous portion into a bowl. He brought it to her, along with a spoon and a piece of hardtack that he had softened in the broth. "Eat slowly, your stomach needs to adjust." Grace ate with the careful concentration of someone who had been truly hungry. She finished the entire bowl and looked like she wanted more, but Isaac made her wait, knowing too much too fast would make her sick. Instead, he took her dress outside and began the laborious process of washing it in the barrel of water he kept by the door. The fabric was good quality, he noticed. Well made, but practical. Not a fancy dress, but one made for travel and work. When he returned inside, Grace had curled up on the bed, her eyes heavy. "I am sorry," she said. "I cannot seem to stay awake." "That is your body healing. Sleep is the best medicine." Isaac pulled a thin blanket over her. "I will be right here if you need anything." Grace's eyes drifted closed, and within moments her breathing had evened into sleep. Isaac watched her for a moment longer than necessary, then forced himself to turn away. He had work to do, chores that could not be neglected just because he had a guest. But for the first time in a long while, he found himself resenting the work, wishing he could just sit and watch over Grace as she slept. The day passed in a strange domestic rhythm. Isaac went about his usual tasks, tending to the cattle that he kept in the near pastures, feeding the chickens that scratched around the cabin, weeding the garden. But every hour or so, he would check on Grace, bringing her water, helping her to the outhouse when she woke enough to need it, feeding her more soup. Each time she thanked him with those solemn gray-green eyes, and each time Isaac felt something shift in his chest. By evening, Grace was awake enough to sit at the table while Isaac prepared a more substantial meal. He made cornbread in his cast-iron skillet and fried up some eggs from the chickens. Simple fare, but filling. Grace ate with better appetite now, color returning to her cheeks. "Tell me about yourself," she said between bites. "You know all about my troubles, but I know nothing of you beyond your name." Isaac shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Not much to tell. I am from Indiana originally. Came out here 5 years ago looking for land of my own. Worked as a ranch hand for a few different outfits, saved my money, and bought this plot 2 years ago. Been building it up slowly since then. No family? My parents and sister are still back in Indiana. I write to them when I can, let them know I'm alive. My mother wants me to come home, get married, settle down proper. But this is home now. This is what I want to build." Isaac gestured to the cabin around them. "Not much yet, but it is mine." Grace smiled. "I think it is wonderful. You are building something from nothing, making your own way. That takes courage. What about you? What were you doing before California?" The smile faded from Grace's face. "I was a seamstress in Ohio. That is where I met Robert. He worked in his father's dry goods store. We married 2 years ago, and everything was fine until his father died last winter. Robert inherited some money, not a lot, but enough that he got it in his head that we should go west, start fresh in California. I wanted to stay, but he insisted, said there was nothing left for us in Ohio." "Did you want to go to California?" Grace looked down at her plate. "No, I liked Ohio. I had friends there, a business starting to do well. But a wife is supposed to follow her husband, is she not? That is what everyone said. So I sold my sewing machine and packed up our things, and we headed west." Isaac heard the bitterness in her voice and understood. Grace had given up her life for a man who had then abandoned her in the wilderness. The anger he felt toward the absent Robert intensified. A husband is supposed to cherish his wife, protect her. Seems to me Robert failed at that. You do not know that. You do not know what happened. No, but I know he left you alone for 6 days in a broken wagon with no water. I know he was not there when you tried to walk for help and nearly died. Those are facts. Grace stood abruptly, swaying slightly before catching herself on the table. I am tired. I should rest. Isaac realized he had pushed too hard, let his anger speak instead of his sense. Grace, I am sorry. I should not have said that. It is not my place. You are right, though. Grace's voice was small, defeated. That is what makes it hurt. You are right, and I do not want you to be. She moved back to the bed and lay down, turning her face to the wall. Isaac cleaned up the remains of dinner in silence, cursing himself for a fool. Grace had been through enough without him adding to her pain by speaking harsh truths she was not ready to hear. When the dishes were done, he pulled out his bedroll and made up a pallet on the floor near the fireplace, giving Grace the bed. Isaac? Grace's voice came soft through the darkness. Yes. Thank you for everything. I do not think I have said that enough. You have said it plenty. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you can rest more. Build your strength back up. Will you tell me a story? I know it is childish, but I do not want to be alone with my thoughts right now. Isaac lay back on his bedroll, staring up at the dark ceiling. All right, let me think. He cast his mind back to the stories his father used to tell around the fire on winter nights. Did I ever tell you about the time I got chased by a pack of wolves? You did not. Well, it was my first winter out here, and I was still green, did not know the land like I do now. I was out checking traps when I heard this howling. Now, I had heard wolves before, but always far off. This was close, too close. I turned around, and there they were, maybe 6 or 7 of them, just standing there watching me. Isaac spun the story out, embellishing it a bit for dramatic effect, and was rewarded by the occasional soft laugh from Grace. He told her about climbing a tree and spending the night there while the wolves circled below, about his horse running off and leaving him stranded, about the old trapper who finally scared the wolves away the next morning and gave him a lecture about respecting the wilderness. By the time he finished, Grace's breathing had evened into sleep. Isaac smiled in the darkness and closed his own eyes, the sound of her breathing a strange comfort in the usually silent cabin. The next few days fell into a pattern. Grace grew stronger steadily, her color returning, her movements becoming more sure. She insisted on helping around the cabin despite Isaac's protests, starting with small tasks like peeling vegetables and working up to washing dishes and sweeping. Isaac found himself enjoying the domesticity of it, coming in from work to find Grace humming as she prepared lunch, sitting across from her at the table as they shared dinner and conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. Grace told him about growing up in Ohio, about learning to sew from her mother, about the intricate patterns of quilts and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful. Isaac told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build a herd of cattle that would be known throughout Iowa, about maybe someday having a real house instead of just a cabin. He did not talk about how much he was starting to dread the day when Grace would be well enough to go to town, to search for her husband, to leave his life as suddenly as she had entered it. He did not talk about how he looked forward to each morning just so he could see her face, how her laugh had become his favorite sound, how the cabin felt like a home instead of just a shelter with her in it. On the 4th day of Grace's recovery, Isaac was mending a fence in the near pasture when he saw a rider approaching. His hand instinctively went to the rifle he kept on his saddle, but he recognized the horse and rider before he needed to reach for it. Tom Henderson, one of the hands from the neighboring ranch, rode up with a friendly wave. Isaac, good to see you. Been a while. Tom was a weathered man in his 50s, with a full gray beard and a permanent squint from years in the sun. Tom, what brings you out this way? Actually, I was hoping you might have some information. You know anything about a woman gone missing? Fellow came through the Morrison Ranch 3 days ago, all worked up, saying his wife had wandered off from their camp and he could not find her. Morrison sent some of us out to look, but we have not found hide nor hair of her. Isaac's gut clenched. What did this man look like? Oh, youngish fellow, maybe 30. Dark hair, well-dressed for traveling, had a wagon with him, one wheel broken. Said his name was Robert something or other. Northwood? Tom's eyes widened. That is it. You know him? I found his wife, Grace. She was nearly dead from heatstroke out in the South Ravine 5 days ago. I have been caring for her at my cabin. Tom let out a low whistle. Well, I will be damned. Robert said she must have gotten confused and wandered off while he was hunting. Said he searched for 2 days before going for help. That is not what Grace told me. She said he left her at the wagon and told her to wait, then never came back. That was 6 days before I found her. Tom's expression darkened. That does not match his story at all. Morrison believed him, sent him into Council Bluffs to file a report with the sheriff. Said the man seemed genuinely distressed. He was distressed because he got caught abandoning his wife. Isaac spat the words, his anger rising. Grace said he had been cruel to her, blamed her for the wagon breaking. I think he saw his chance to be rid of her and took it. Those are serious accusations, Isaac. I know what I know. Grace nearly died because he left her alone with no water in the middle of August. If I had not found her when I did, she would be dead now. And Robert would have had himself a convenient tragedy instead of a wife he did not want anymore. Tom rubbed his beard thoughtfully. Well, this is a mess. Morrison will want to know she has been found, and the sheriff will too. And Robert, I suppose, though, from what you were saying, he might not be so happy about it. I will bring Grace to town tomorrow. She is well enough to travel now. We will sort this out proper with the sheriff. Want me to ride ahead, let folks know? Isaac considered. No. I want to see Robert's face when he realizes Grace is alive. I want to watch him try to explain himself. Tom nodded slowly. All right. But you be careful, Isaac. A man who would abandon his wife might do worse if he feels cornered. After Tom rode off, Isaac stood in the pasture for a long time, staring at the horizon. He had known this moment would come, when Grace's husband would reappear and claim her. But he had not expected it to happen so soon, had not prepared himself for the reality of losing her, because that was what it would mean. Grace was married, and unless Robert released her, she would be tied to him regardless of what Isaac felt. And what did he feel? Isaac forced himself to examine the question honestly. In less than a week, Grace had become essential to him in a way he could not fully explain. She made him laugh, made him think, made him want to be better than he was. When she smiled at him across the table, he felt like he could do anything, be anything. When she touched his hand in passing, even accidentally, his skin burned with awareness. He was falling in love with her, had probably already fallen. Isaac walked slowly back to the cabin, dreading the conversation he needed to have. Grace was outside hanging laundry, her hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing her own dress which had dried clean and soft. She looked up as he approached, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. What is wrong? A rider came by, Tom Henderson from the Morrison Ranch. Grace, your husband is alive. He showed up at Morrison's place 3 days ago, claiming you had wandered off. They have been searching for you. All the color drained from Grace's face. She swayed, and Isaac was there in an instant, catching her, supporting her. He came back, she whispered. He actually came back. He told a different story than what you told me. Said you wandered off while he was hunting. Said he searched for you before going for help. Grace pulled away from Isaac, wrapping her arms around herself. That is not true. I waited at the wagon like he told me to. I waited until the water ran out and I had no choice but to try to walk. Her voice rose, becoming sharp with anger and hurt. He left me there. He wanted me gone. I believe you, Grace. She looked at him with eyes full of anguish. But will anyone else? I am just a wife. He is a man with property and money. Who will they believe? The sheriff will have to investigate. Your story and his do not match. That means someone is lying and the truth will come out. Isaac wanted to reach for her, to pull her close, and promise that everything would be all right. But he kept his hands at his sides. We will go to town tomorrow. You will tell your story, and we will see what Robert has to say for himself. Grace nodded numbly. All right. Tomorrow then? They barely spoke for the rest of the day. Grace retreated into herself, her face pale and drawn with worry. Isaac wanted to comfort her, but did not know how, did not know what words could possibly help. That night, as they lay in their separate beds, Isaac listened to Grace crying softly in the darkness and felt helpless rage burn through him. Morning came too quickly. Isaac hitched up his wagon, preferring it to horseback for the long ride to Council Bluffs. Grace was silent as he helped her onto the seat, her face set in lines of grim determination. She had braided her hair severely and wore her dress buttoned to the throat, every inch the proper lady despite the circumstances. The ride to Council Bluffs took most of the morning. The town was bustling when they arrived, a growing community built on the banks of the Missouri River. Isaac drove the wagon straight to the sheriff's office, a small wooden building near the center of town. He helped Grace down, and together they walked inside. The sheriff was a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache and shrewd eyes. He looked up from his desk as they entered, his gaze moving from Isaac to Grace with interest. "Can I help you folks?" "My name is Isaac Quinlan. This is Grace Northwood. I believe her husband filed a missing person report a few days ago." The sheriff stood abruptly. "Mrs. Northwood? Good God, woman, half the county has been out searching for you. Where have you been?" Grace lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the tremor Isaac could see in her hands. "I was dying of heatstroke in a ravine until Mr. Quinlan found me and saved my life. I have been recovering at his cabin." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Your husband said you wandered off while he was hunting. Said he searched for 2 days before coming for help." "My husband is a liar." The words came out flat and cold. "He left me at our broken wagon with minimal supplies and told me to wait while he went for help. That was 6 or 7 days before Mr. Quinlan found me. I waited until the water ran out, then tried to walk. If not for Mr. Quinlan, I would be dead." "Those are serious accusations, Mrs. Northwood." "Then perhaps you should hear them from her directly." A new voice came from the doorway, and Isaac turned to see a man he instantly knew must be Robert Northwood. He was handsome in a polished way, well-dressed, with dark hair and calculating eyes that were currently fixed on Grace with an expression Isaac could not quite read. "Grace!" Robert moved forward, his arms outstretched as if to embrace her. "Thank God you are safe. I have been out of my mind with worry." Grace stepped back, putting Isaac between herself and her husband. "Do not touch me." Robert stopped, his face arranging itself into lines of hurt confusion. "Grace, darling, what is wrong? I know you must have been terrified, lost out there, but you are safe now. We can be together again." "You left me to die." "What? No." "Grace, I went hunting to get us food. When I came back, you were gone. I searched everywhere, called your name until my voice gave out." Robert turned to the sheriff, his expression earnest. "She must have gotten confused, disoriented by the heat. I know how heatstroke can affect a person's mind." "I am not confused." Grace's voice shook with rage. "You told me you were going for help with the wagon. You told me to wait. That was 6 days before Isaac found me. 6 days, Robert." "Darling, it was 2 days at most. And I was hunting, not getting help. We needed food." Robert's voice was patient, condescending, the tone of someone speaking to a child. "The heat must have made it seem longer. I came back as soon as I could, and when you were gone, I immediately went for help." Isaac saw what Robert was doing, saw how he was painting Grace as unreliable, her memory affected by illness. It was clever, and made worse by the fact that there was no proof either way. "She was nearly dead when I found her," Isaac said, his voice hard. "Another few hours and she would have been gone. The supplies at her campsite were long exhausted. It was more than 2 days. Robert's eyes turned cold as they fixed on Isaac. "And who might you be?" "Isaac Quinlan. I am the man who saved your wife's life while you were busy abandoning her." "I did no such thing. Are you calling me a liar?" "If the boot fits." "Gentlemen," the sheriff's voice cracked like a whip. "That is enough. Mr. Northwood, did you or did you not tell your wife you were going for help with the wagon?" "I told her I was going hunting. If she misunderstood, that is unfortunate, but not my fault." "Where exactly was this campsite?" Robert gave a location about 15 miles north of Council Bluffs. The sheriff made a note. "And you were saying you were gone for 2 days?" "Roughly, maybe a bit less. Game was scarce." "Did you bring back any game?" Robert hesitated for just a moment. "No, as I said, game was scarce." "So you went hunting for 2 days and came back empty-handed to find your wife gone. Then what?" "Then I searched for her. I looked everywhere I could think of, calling her name. When I could not find her, I knew I needed help, so I headed to the nearest ranch." The sheriff turned to Grace. "Mrs. Northwood, can you tell me your version of events?" Grace took a deep breath, and Isaac could see her gathering her strength. "We left Ohio 3 months ago, heading for California. The journey started well enough, but after a few weeks, Robert became angry and impatient. He blamed me when things went wrong, said I slowed him down with my belongings. When the wagon wheel broke, he was furious. He said it was my fault for insisting on bringing my mother's things. "That is not true," Robert interjected, but the sheriff silenced him with a look. "Go on, Mrs. Northwood." He said he was going to town to get help and supplies, told me to wait at the wagon, that he would be back in a day or two. He left me with 1 canteen of water and a small amount of food. That was all. Grace's voice cracked, but she continued. I waited. The first day was fine. The second day was harder. By the third day, the water was gone, and Robert had not returned. I thought maybe he had gotten lost or hurt, so I kept waiting. By the 5th day, I knew something was wrong. I tried to ration what little water I had left, but it was not enough. On the 6th day, or maybe the 7th, I am not sure anymore, I knew I would die if I stayed at the wagon, so I tried to walk toward where I thought town might be. That is the last thing I remember, until I woke up with Isaac caring for me at the creek. The sheriff made notes, his expression thoughtful. That is quite a different story from your husband's. Mrs. Northwood? Because my husband is lying. Grace looked directly at Robert. You wanted to be rid of me. You have wanted it for weeks. This was your chance, and you took it. Robert's mask of concern slipped for just a moment, and Isaac saw cold calculation in his eyes before he arranged his features back into hurt bewilderment. Grace, how can you say such things? I love you. You are my wife. You love my dowry. You love the idea of having a wife who would work and not complain. But when the journey got hard, when I could not make everything perfect, you decided I was not worth the trouble anymore. This is madness, Sheriff. Surely you can see that my wife is not in her right mind. The ordeal has affected her thinking. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. What I see is 2 very different stories, and no way to prove which is true, unless... He looked at Isaac. Mr. Quinlan, you found Mrs. Northwood? Can you describe her condition? Isaac chose his words carefully. She was unconscious, suffering from severe heat stroke. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin burned by the sun. She had no water, no supplies. Based on her condition, I would say she had been without water for at least 2 or 3 days, maybe longer. And where exactly did you find her? Isaac described the location of the ravine. The sheriff pulled out a map and had both Robert and Isaac point out the relevant locations. The ravine where Isaac had found Grace was nearly 10 miles from the campsite Robert had indicated, and in the opposite direction from Council Bluffs. Mrs. Northwood, the sheriff said slowly, if you were trying to walk to town, why were you heading south instead of north? Grace shook her head helplessly. I do not know. I must have gotten turned around. I have never been good with directions, and I was so desperate, so thirsty. I just started walking, hoping to find water or people or anything. The sheriff nodded. That makes sense. Disorientation is common with heat stroke. He turned back to Robert. Mr. Northwood, I am going to need you to show me this campsite. If your wife was there for as long as she claims, there should be evidence. Use supplies, signs of a long stay. For the first time, Robert looked uncertain. Of course, though I do not know what you expect to find. We had minimal supplies to begin with. We will see. In the meantime, Mrs. Northwood, where will you be staying? Grace looked at Isaac, her eyes desperate. I do not know. She can stay at my cabin, Isaac said immediately. It is not proper, but she needs time to recover, and I will not leave her without protection. Absolutely not, Robert's voice rose. She is my wife. She will stay with me. No! Grace's voice was equally loud, sharp with fear. I will not stay with him. Isaac, please. Isaac moved closer to Grace, standing between her and Robert like a shield. She does not want to go with you, Northwood. I am not going to force her. Robert's face flushed with anger. Sheriff, this man has clearly taken advantage of my wife while she was vulnerable. God knows what he has done to her, what lies he has filled her head with. She is not thinking clearly. I am thinking perfectly clearly, Grace said, her voice like ice. Clearer than I have in months, and what I see clearly is that you tried to kill me, and when that failed, you came back to town to play the grieving husband. Well, I am not dead, Robert, and I am not going to let you finish what you started. The room fell silent, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. The sheriff cleared his throat. These are serious charges, Mrs. Northwood. Do you truly believe your husband attempted to murder you? Grace met his eyes steadily. "Yes, I do." Robert laughed, but it sounded forced. "This is insane. Sheriff, arrest this man for kidnapping. He has clearly brainwashed my wife. I have not kidnapped anyone. Mrs. Northwood is free to go wherever she chooses. She chooses not to go with you." The sheriff held up his hands. "Everyone calm down. Mr. Northwood, I am going to need you to stay in town for a few days while I investigate this matter. Mrs. Northwood, you are free to stay where you wish, but I may have more questions for you. Mr. Quinlan, the same goes for you." "What about my wife?" Robert demanded. "Your wife is an adult woman. She can make her own decisions about where to stay." "This is outrageous. I have rights. She is my wife. And she has rights too, Mr. Northwood. The law does not give you the right to force her to stay with you against her will, especially not under these circumstances." The sheriff's voice was firm. "Now, I suggest you get yourself a room at the hotel and prepare to show me that campsite tomorrow morning. We will get to the bottom of this." Robert's face went through several expressions before settling on cold anger. He looked at Grace. "You are making a terrible mistake. When this is all sorted out, you will come back to me and you will regret this rebellion." "The only thing I regret is marrying you," Grace replied quietly. Robert stormed out, slamming the door behind him. In the sudden silence, Grace swayed on her feet, and Isaac caught her, supporting her weight. The sheriff's expression softened. "Mrs. Northwood, I can see you have been through an ordeal. I will do my best to sort this out fairly. In the meantime, try to rest and regain your strength." Isaac guided Grace out of the sheriff's office and back to the wagon. She was trembling, adrenaline and fear finally catching up with her. He helped her onto the seat and climbed up beside her, taking the reins. "Let us get you back to the cabin." "Isaac," Grace's hand found his on the seat between them. "Thank you. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for standing with me." Isaac turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. "Always, Grace. For as long as you need me, I will be here." They rode back to the cabin in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than the mornings. This was companionable, almost peaceful, despite everything. Grace's hand stayed in Isaac's the entire way, and he found himself memorizing the feel of it, the way her smaller fingers fit between his, the warmth of her palm against his. When they reached the cabin, Isaac helped Grace down from the wagon and was surprised when she did not immediately go inside. Instead, she turned to face him, her gray-green eyes searching his face. "Isaac, I need to know something." "What is it?" "Why are you doing this? You barely know me. You could have left me at the creek once I recovered enough to travel. You could have stayed out of this mess with Robert. Why are you helping me?" Isaac looked at her, this brave woman who had faced death and betrayal and still stood tall and knew he had to tell her the truth. "Because from the moment I found you, Grace, something changed. I do not know how to explain it except to say that you matter to me, more than you should, probably, given the circumstances. But I cannot seem to help it. I look at you, and I see someone worth fighting for, someone worth standing beside no matter what comes." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I am still married, Isaac. Even if Robert did what I think he did, even if he is arrested, I am still legally bound to him. We cannot be together. I know, but that does not change how I feel, and it does not mean I'm going to abandon you. Whatever happens, wherever this leads, you will not face it alone. I promise you that." A tear rolled down Grace's cheek, and Isaac gently wiped it away with his thumb. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You deserve someone who will cherish you, protect you, put you first. You deserve to be loved, Grace." She opened her eyes, and the look in them made Isaac's breath catch. "I think," she said slowly, "that I am starting to understand what that might feel like." Before Isaac could respond, before he could even process what she was saying, Grace stood on her toes and pressed her lips to his. It was just a brief touch, soft and hesitant, but it shot through Isaac like lightning. He froze, torn between pulling her closer and pushing her away, between what he wanted and what was right. Grace pulled back, her face flushing. "I am sorry. I should not have done that. I am married, and you deserve better than a woman with so many complications." "Grace." Isaac caught her hand before she could flee. "Do not apologize for that. But we need to be careful. Until things with Robert are resolved, we have to be circumspect. The last thing you need is accusations of adultery on top of everything else. Grace nodded, looking miserable. You are right. I am sorry. I was not thinking. Hey! Isaac waited until she looked at him. I am not sorry you kissed me. I just want to do this right, when the time is right. Can you understand that? Yes, you are a better person than I am, Isaac Quinlan. I doubt that very much. The next 2 weeks were among the strangest of Isaac's life. The sheriff's investigation proceeded slowly, methodically. He visited the campsite with Robert and confirmed that there was evidence of a long stay, the kind that would support Grace's story rather than Robert's. He interviewed the hands from the Morrison ranch, who confirmed that Robert had seemed more relieved than distressed when he came to report his wife missing. He examined the wagon and found that the wheel was not simply broken, but had been deliberately damaged, as if someone had taken an axe to it. Each piece of evidence built a damning picture, but proving attempted murder was difficult. Robert maintained his story, claiming that Grace was confused and that Isaac had manipulated her. He hired a lawyer, a slick man from Omaha, who argued that at worst, Robert had been negligent, not murderous, and that a man should not be punished for poor judgment. Through it all, Grace stayed at Isaac's cabin, and they fell into a domestic routine that felt both right and impossibly complicated. They were careful to maintain propriety, never touching more than necessary, but the awareness between them was constant, electric. Isaac would catch Grace watching him as he worked, her eyes soft and wondering. Grace would find excuses to brush past him in the small cabin, each accidental touch leaving them both breathless. They talked for hours every evening, sitting at the table over coffee, learning each other's histories and dreams. Grace told him about her mother, who had taught her to sew, and about her father, who had died when she was young. She told him about her love of creating beautiful things, how satisfying it was to take plain fabric and turn it into something special. Isaac told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build something that would last, that he could pass down to children someday. Children? Grace had asked, her voice soft. Someday. If I am lucky enough to find a woman who wants to build a life with me out here, it is a hard life, not suited for everyone. I think it is beautiful. Hard, yes, but honest. You work and you see the results of that work. You build something real. Grace's eyes had been fixed on his face. I think any woman would be lucky to share this life with you. The air had grown thick between them, heavy with unspoken words, and Isaac had forced himself to stand, to move away before he did something foolish like kiss her, until neither of them could think straight. 3 weeks after Grace had first woken in his arms at the creek, the sheriff came to the cabin with news. Isaac and Grace met him in the yard, standing close together, without touching. I have made my decision, the sheriff said without preamble. I do not have enough evidence to charge Mr. Northwood with attempted murder, but I have more than enough to charge him with abandonment and reckless endangerment. He left his wife alone in the wilderness with insufficient supplies, and whether he meant for her to die or was simply criminally negligent, the result was nearly the same. He will face trial. Grace's knees buckled slightly, and Isaac caught her elbow, steadying her. What does that mean for me? She asked. It means you have options, Mrs. Northwood. Given the circumstances, you have grounds for divorce. In fact, I have spoken with Judge Morrison, and he is willing to grant you a divorce on the grounds of abandonment and cruelty. It is not common, but it is possible. Divorce. Grace said the word like it was foreign, strange in her mouth. I can divorce him? Yes, it will take time, a few months probably, but yes, you can be free of him. Isaac felt hope surge in his chest, fierce and bright. Grace could be free. They could have a chance, a real chance, at a future together. He looked at her, saw the same hope dawning on her face, mixed with fear and uncertainty. What will happen to Robert? She asked. If found guilty, he will likely face prison time and a fine. But that is not your concern anymore, Mrs. Northwood. You need to focus on yourself, on building a new life. After the sheriff left, Grace and Isaac stood in the yard for a long time, not speaking. Finally, Grace turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I can be free, she whispered. Isaac, I can actually be free. You can. Isaac allowed himself to reach out, to cup her face gently in his hands. You can be free, Grace. You can have the life you want. What if the life I want includes you? Isaac's heart hammered in his chest. Then I would say I am the luckiest man alive. But Grace, you need time. You need to heal from all this, to figure out who you are without Robert's shadow over you. I do not want you to choose me because I am safe or convenient. I want you to choose me because you truly want to, because you cannot imagine any other choice. Grace smiled through her tears. You are asking me to wait. I am asking us both to wait, to do this right, to give ourselves time to be sure. And if I am already sure, then waiting a few months will not change that, will it? Grace laughed, a sound like bells. You are infuriatingly sensible, Isaac Quinlan. One of us has to be. You make me want to throw caution to the wind and damn the consequences. Maybe we should. Maybe we have already wasted enough time. Isaac pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair. Maybe, but I want to court you properly, Grace. I want to take you to dances and buy you presents and let the whole town know that I am trying to win your heart. I want to do everything right this time, because you deserve that. You deserve to be cherished and wooed, not just grabbed onto because you are convenient. Grace pulled back enough to look up at him. My heart is already won, you stubborn man. It has been since you stayed with me all day at the creek, since you carried me to your home and cared for me like I mattered. You have already given me everything I need. Then you will not mind waiting a little longer while we make it official. Grace sighed but smiled. Fine, we will wait. But Isaac? Yes? I am going to make that wait as difficult for you as possible. Isaac laughed, a full, genuine laugh that felt like freedom. I would expect nothing less. The next 4 months were both torture and bliss. Grace filed for divorce, and the legal proceedings began, slow and complicated but inevitable. Robert fought it at first, but once he was convicted of reckless endangerment and sentenced to 6 months in prison, his protests lost their power. His lawyer advised him to agree to the divorce, and finally, blessedly, he signed the papers. During those months, Isaac courted Grace properly, despite the fact that she was living in his cabin. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, making her laugh with the awkward way he presented them. He took her into town for dances at the community hall, where they moved together like they had been partners for years. He taught her to ride, patient and encouraging, as she gained confidence on horseback. They explored the land around his ranch together, and Grace fell in love with the rolling hills and endless sky just as Isaac had hoped she would. Grace transformed the cabin, making it into a true home. She sewed curtains for the window, pieced together a quilt for the bed from scraps she bought in town. She planted flowers around the door and herbs in the kitchen garden. She cooked meals that made Isaac close his eyes in appreciation, and she laughed at his terrible jokes, and she fit into his life like she had always been there. They were careful about propriety, always making sure there were witnesses when possible, always maintaining separate sleeping arrangements. But the tension between them grew with each passing week, each accidental touch, each long look across the dinner table. Isaac found himself counting the days until Grace would be free, until he could hold her without restraint, kiss her without guilt, make her his in every way that mattered. Finally, in December of 1878, the divorce was finalized. Grace was free. Isaac had been planning his proposal for weeks, waiting for this moment. On a clear, cold evening, when fresh snow blanketed the prairie, he took Grace for a walk to the creek where he had first saved her life. The water was edged with ice now, the cottonwoods bare against the winter sky, but the place was still beautiful in its stark way. Grace seemed to know what was coming. She turned to face him, her eyes shining in the fading light, her breath puffing in small clouds. Isaac? Grace. He took her hands, feeling how cold they were even through her gloves. 5 months ago, I found you dying in a ravine. I carried you to this spot, and I stayed with you all day and into the night, and somewhere in those hours, I started to fall in love with you. I did not mean to. You were married and sick, and I knew I should not let myself feel anything, but I could not help it. You were so brave, so strong, and you made me feel things I had never felt before. Isaac, Grace said again, her voice trembling. Let me finish. These past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you in my home, sharing meals and conversations and dreams, it has shown me what life could be like, what I want it to be like. I love you, Grace. I love your laugh and your courage and the way you hum when you sew. I love how you make everything better just by being there. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much." Isaac pulled off his glove and reached into his pocket, drawing out a simple gold ring. It was not fancy, but it was real gold, and he had spent weeks' worth of wages on it. "Grace Northwood, will you marry me? Will you let me court you properly and then stand beside me and build a life together? Will you be my wife?" Tears streamed down Grace's face, freezing on her cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Isaac, 1,000 times. Yes. I love you so much. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it. Of course I will marry you." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close and kissed her properly for the first time. It was everything he had imagined and more, sweet and fierce and full of promise. Grace kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a long moment they stood in the snow by the frozen creek, two people who had found each other against all odds. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Grace was laughing. "I told you I was already sure." "You were right. You are always right. I will try to remember that." "See that you do." They married in January of 1879 in a small ceremony at the church in Council Bluffs. Isaac's family came out from Indiana for the wedding, his mother crying happy tears and his father clapping him on the back with pride. Grace's friends from Ohio sent gifts and good wishes, along with fabric and sewing notions, so she could set up her seamstress business again. The whole town turned out for the celebration afterward, dancing and eating and toasting the newlyweds' health. When Isaac finally carried Grace over the threshold of their cabin, now truly their home, he felt a sense of rightness so profound it made his chest ache. This was what he had been working toward, what all those years of hard labor and sacrifice had been for. Not just land and cattle, but this. A woman he loved beyond measure, a life they would build together, a future full of possibility. That first night as husband and wife, they lay together in the bed Grace had made beautiful with her quilts, and Isaac held her close, marveling that she was real, that she was his. "I cannot believe you are here," he murmured against her hair. "Sometimes I think I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." Grace tilted her face up to kiss him softly. "If it is a dream, then we are both dreaming it, and I never want to wake up." They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies with care and wonder. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms as snow fell softly outside, they talked about their dreams for the future. Children, they both agreed, wanted several. Isaac wanted to expand the ranch, build a real house with multiple rooms and a porch for sitting on summer evenings. Grace wanted to build her sewing business, create beautiful things that would brighten people's lives. "We will do it all," Isaac promised. "Whatever you want, however long it takes, we will build it together." "Together," Grace agreed. "I like the sound of that." The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Isaac's knowledge of cattle and land management, complemented by Grace's head for business and finances. Grace's seamstress work brought in additional income and gave her an outlet for her creativity. She became known throughout the county for her fine work, and women would travel for miles to commission dresses and quilts from her. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Isaac's father, was born in the winter of 1880. Isaac had never known terror like watching Grace labor to bring their child into the world, and he had never known joy like holding his son for the first time, seeing Grace's exhausted, beautiful smile as she watched them together. A daughter, Emily, followed in 1882, and then another son, William, in 1884. The cabin grew too small for their expanding family, and Isaac built the house he had promised, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and enough bedrooms for all the children they hoped to have. Grace planted a garden that became the envy of the county, growing not just vegetables but flowers that bloomed in riotous color from spring through fall. Life was full and rich, and sometimes overwhelming. There were hard winters and dry summers, years when the cattle prices dropped and money was tight. There were illnesses that had them both terrified, sitting up through long nights watching over feverish children. There were arguments because no marriage is perfect, moments when they frustrated each other or did not see eye to eye. But through it all, there was love, fierce, steadfast love that had been forged in the heat of the prairie sun and tempered by time. Every morning, Isaac would wake to find Grace beside him and feel grateful all over again. Every evening, Grace would watch Isaac play with their children and remember the man who had saved her life and given her a future worth living. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac took Grace back to the creek where they had first met, where he had carried her from the edge of death and stayed with her all day. It was summer again, hot and bright, but they had brought plenty of water and shade. They sat by the water's edge, watching it burble over the stones, and talked about how far they had come. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not found you that day?" Isaac asked, holding Grace's hand. "Sometimes, usually when I am holding one of our children, or watching you work on the ranch. And I think about how close I came to missing all of this, and it terrifies me. But then, I think about how you did find me, how you stayed with me, and how that one day changed everything. It was meant to be, I think. We were meant to find each other. I believe that too. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Grace. I love you more now than I did the day we married. And I love you more than words can say. Thank you for saving me, Isaac, for staying with me, for choosing me every day since." Isaac pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I would choose you in every lifetime, in every version of the world. You are my heart, Grace. You always will be." They had 2 more children over the years, another daughter and a son, bringing their total to 5. The ranch became one of the most successful in the county, a testament to hard work and smart management. Grace's sewing business thrived, and she eventually took on apprentices, teaching young women the skills her mother had taught her. Isaac's parents moved out from Indiana eventually, unable to resist the pull of grandchildren and the chance to see their son's success firsthand. They built a small house on a corner of the ranch land, and Isaac's mother and Grace became as close as mother and daughter, working together in the garden and watching over the children. As the years turned into decades, Isaac and Grace grew old together, their hair graying, their bodies marked by time and hard work. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared history and mutual respect. They celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, the house bursting with family and laughter. That evening, after everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Isaac and Grace sat on the porch swing they had installed years ago, watching the sun set over the prairie. 50 years, Grace said wonderingly. "Can you believe it has been 50 years since you found me? 51 since I found you, 50 since we married, and it still does not feel like enough time." Isaac squeezed her hand gently. "I could live 100 more years with you and still want more. I am glad you found me that day, Isaac. I am glad you stayed. I cannot imagine my life without you, and I cannot imagine mine without you. You made everything worthwhile, Grace. Every struggle, every hardship, it was all worth it because I got to share it with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had shone down on them that first night by the creek so many years ago. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to what they had built together. Inside the house, they could hear the faint sounds of grandchildren being tucked into bed, the next generation already making their mark. Isaac looked at Grace, seeing both the young woman he had carried to water and the elder stateswoman she had become, and felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. Life had given him many gifts, but none compared to her. "I love you, Grace Quinlan. And I love you, Isaac Quinlan, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." They rocked gently on the porch swing, 2 souls who had found each other in the vast wilderness of the West, and built a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. The cowboy who had found a woman unconscious from heatstroke and stayed with her all day had never guessed that day would change his entire world. But it had, and he had never once regretted it. As the moon rose over the prairie, casting silver light across the land they loved, Isaac and Grace sat together in perfect contentment, living proof that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of kindness, a decision to stay when you could have left, a choice to care for a stranger who becomes your whole world. Their story had begun with heat and desperation and near death, but it had grown into something far greater, a love that spanned decades, a family that carried their legacy forward, a home built on the foundation of 2 hearts beating as one. And if you had asked either of them, in those quiet twilight years, what they were most proud of in their long lives, they would not have mentioned the prosperous ranch or the successful business or even the 5 wonderful children they had raised. They would have said simply that they had loved each other well, fully, without reservation, from that first day by the creek until their last breaths. And that, they would have told you, was the only thing that truly mattered. Years continued to pass peacefully. Isaac and Grace remained active well into their 70s, still taking morning walks together, still sitting on the porch swing each evening to watch the sunset. Their children who had children, and the ranch passed to their eldest son Thomas, who ran it with the same dedication his father had shown. Grace continued to sew almost until the end, her fingers slower but still skillful, creating quilts for each new great-grandchild that came along. Isaac still rode out to check the cattle most mornings, though Grace made him promise to stay on the gentle trails and always tell someone where he was going. They never forgot that day at the creek, that moment when their lives had intersected and changed both their destinies. Every summer, on the anniversary of the day they met, they would make the journey out to that spot and spend a few hours there, remembering, grateful for the chance encounter that had become a lifetime of love. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Grace's hand in his, their children gathered around. His last words were, "I love you," spoken to the woman who had made his life complete. Grace followed him just 6 months later, as if unable to bear being without him after all those years together. The family said she went with a smile on her face, finally reunited with her beloved husband. They were buried side by side in the cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky as vast and blue as the one that had witnessed their first meeting. The headstone bore both their names and a simple inscription, "Together, always." And in the house that Isaac had built, in the ranch they had grown, in the hearts of the family they had created, their love story lived on. The cowboy and the woman he had saved from heatstroke, who had stayed with her when anyone else might have left, who had shown her what true love looked like and built a life that honored that love every single day. Their great-grandchildren would ask to hear the story again and again about how great-grandfather Isaac had found great-grandmother Grace dying in a ravine, how he had carried her to water and stayed all day, how that one act of kindness had blossomed into a love story for the ages. And the family would tell it, preserving every detail, making sure that future generations knew where they came from, knew what real love looked like. Because Isaac and Grace's story was more than just a romance. It was a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of staying when it would be easier to leave, the miracle that can happen when two souls meant for each other finally find their way together. It was a reminder that love is not always instant or easy, that sometimes the greatest loves grow slowly from seeds of kindness and respect and genuine caring. Their story was proof that happy endings were possible, even after the darkest beginnings. That hope could survive desperation, that trust could be rebuilt after betrayal, that two broken people could heal each other and create something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. And so, the story of Isaac and Grace lived on, told and retold, embellished slightly with each generation, but always true in its essential elements. A cowboy found a woman unconscious from heatstroke. He carried her to water and stayed all day. And in that staying, in that simple act of refusing to abandon someone in need, he found not just her life worth saving, but his own worth living. They fell in love slowly, surely, building a foundation that could weather any storm. And they lived happily ever after, truly and completely, until the end of their days and beyond. The ranch still stands, run now by the 5th generation of their family. The creek still flows, its water clear and cold. And sometimes, on hot summer days, ranch hands swear they can see two figures by the water's edge, an older couple holding hands, watching the sunset together just as they did for so many years. Maybe it is just tricks of the light, shadows, and imagination. Or maybe it is Isaac and Grace, still together in the place where their story began, still grateful for that fateful day when death brought them together and love made them inseparable. Their story serves as a reminder to all who hear it that kindness matters, that love is worth fighting for, that happy endings are possible if you are willing to stay, to work, to believe. Isaac stayed with Grace all day by that creek so many years ago, and in return, she stayed with him for a lifetime. Together, they proved that sometimes the best love stories start with the simplest acts of human decency, and that from such small beginnings, great and lasting joy can grow. And so, their legacy continues, written in the faces of their descendants, in the land they cultivated, in the love they shared so generously with everyone around them. Isaac and Grace Quinlan, a cowboy, and the woman he saved, who saved him right back. A love story born in the brutal heat of the prairie summer that burned bright and true for over half a century. A reminder that sometimes staying is the bravest and most important thing you can do. Their story, beginning with a man who chose to care when he could have walked away, who carried a dying woman to water and refused to leave her side, stands as one of the great love stories of the American West. Not because it was dramatic or scandalous, but because it was true. Because two ordinary people faced extraordinary circumstances and chose love, chose loyalty, chose each other, and in doing so, created something extraordinary. The end.